My girlfriend cheated, then tried to frame me, so I recorded everything, took her to court, and watched The Mask finally fall. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and if you met me 3 years ago, you'd say I was the happiest man alive. I had a stable job, a small but cozy apartment, and what I thought was the perfect girlfriend. Her name was Natalie, 27, confident, magnetic, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and have everyone smiling within minutes. When we first met through mutual friends, she made me feel seen in a way no one ever had. She called me steady, said I was the calm to her chaos. I didn't realize then how those words would come back to haunt me. Natalie had this protective streak. She'd wrap her arms around me in public, check in constantly, text good morning and good night every single day. I thought it was love. Maybe at first it was. She said she'd finally found someone she could trust, and I felt proud of being that guy. When she suggested moving in together after a year, it felt natural. She decorated our apartment with soft lights and indoor plants, played our favorite playlists on lazy Sundays, and left little sticky notes on the mirror. "You're my forever." Those first few months were beautiful. We'd wake up early to make coffee together, tease each other over burnt toast, and talk about saving for a house. She even convinced me to open a joint savings account, saying it would make us feel like a real team. I remember signing those papers, smiling at her across the bank counter, thinking this was what adulthood was supposed to feel like. Safe, secure, shared. But looking back now, that account was the first trap she set. And I walked right into it, blind and smiling, completely unaware that I'd just handed her the keys to destroy my life. At first, the changes were so subtle I told myself I was imagining them. Natalie started asking more questions about my day, who I talked to, how long I stayed after work, why my phone was on silent. It sounded like concern, but the tone wasn't loving anymore. It was sharp, defensive. I'd come home tired and find her scrolling through my messages, pretending to be just checking something. When I'd ask what she was doing, she'd laugh it off. "Relax, babe, I'm just being curious." "What, do you have something to hide?" Her jokes started feeling like tests. When I texted a female coworker about a project, she went quiet for hours, then exploded later that night. "Do you enjoy making me feel insecure?" She snapped, slamming her phone down. I tried to explain, but it didn't matter. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened, kissed me goodbye, made me coffee, told me to stop overthinking. That became her favorite phrase. Stop overthinking, but the truth is, she'd already started rewriting the rules. She controlled what we watched, who we saw, how we spent weekends. If I wanted a night out with friends, she'd guilt me, say she felt abandoned. If I stayed home, she'd scroll through her phone all night, barely looking at me. I couldn't win. One evening, she came into the living room and said, "I don't like your coworker Rachel. I can tell she likes you." I laughed nervously, but her face stayed blank, dead serious. "If you respect me, you'll keep things professional," she added. That night, lying in bed next to her, I realized something cold had entered our home. It wasn't love anymore. It was control, disguised as care. And the scariest part? I still thought I could fix it. It happened on a Thursday night, one of those evenings where everything feels slightly off. I'd stayed late at work, finishing a report, and when I walked into our apartment, the lights were dim. Music was playing softly, and Natalie was sitting on the couch in a dress I hadn't seen before. She smiled too quickly, too wide. "Hey, stranger," she said, walking over to kiss me. Her perfume was strong, like she'd just sprayed it seconds before I came in. My gut twisted. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Of course," she said. "Just missed you." But as she hugged me, I noticed her phone on the coffee table, screen lighting up with a message that said, "He's home early." She snatched it up before I could read more, laughing it off. Group chat. My friend's being dramatic." Then she switched off her phone and changed the subject. Too fast. Too smooth. The rest of the night she was overly affectionate, leaning on me, kissing my neck while I tried to eat dinner, calling me baby in that syrupy tone she usually used when she was hiding something. When I went to take out the trash, I heard her whispering in the kitchen. The second she saw me, she fumbled with her phone again and smiled like nothing happened. By the time we went to bed, my heart wouldn't stop pounding. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, pretending to be asleep while she typed quietly under the covers. The next morning, I kissed her goodbye like everything was normal. But as soon as she left for work, I drove straight to the hardware store and bought a small voice recorder. I didn't know what I was going to find, but something inside me already knew. I wasn't paranoid. I was preparing for war. The next morning felt endless. Every second stretched like it was taunting me, daring me to check the recorder. I waited until Natalie left for work, the sound of her car fading down the street before I even moved. My hands were trembling when I pulled the small device from under the couch cushion where I'd hidden it the night before. I pressed play. At first, it was just silence. Then her voice filled the room. Light, teasing, intimate. But she wasn't talking to me. "Yeah, he still has no idea," she said, laughing. "He's so gullible. It's actually kind of sad." My stomach dropped. There was a man's voice, too, deep and casual, like this was routine for them. "He's a good guy, though," he said. "You sure you want to keep this up?" "Oh, please," she scoffed. "He's boring, reliable, that's all. He pays the bills, handles everything. I'm not letting go of that until I'm ready." The sound of her laughter twisted something in me. I couldn't breathe. I skipped forward, her voice again, quieter this time. "I'll move the money soon. He won't even notice." The words slammed into me like a punch. My chest felt tight, the room spinning. I stopped the playback and just sat there, listening to my own breathing. Everything. The shared bank account, her fake sweetness, the sudden possessiveness. It all made sense now. But instead of rage, what I felt was cold. Focused. She'd built this entire relationship like a con, and I had been her willing mark. That night, when she came home, she kissed me like nothing had changed. I smiled back, kissed her forehead, and said softly, "You know, Nat, I really am lucky to have you." She smiled, completely unaware. And that's when I decided I wasn't going to confront her. I was going to document her. For the next few weeks, I played the role of the perfect boyfriend, smiling, cooking dinner, holding her hand in public like nothing had changed. Inside, though, every word she said felt like a test, and every lie she told became another piece of evidence. I upgraded the recorder to a hidden camera inside our bookshelf, synced her phone to my laptop using an old backup login, and started collecting everything. Every text, every whisper, every transaction. Natalie must have sensed something because she turned up the charm. She'd wake me up with breakfast in bed, send me long messages about how thankful she was to have me, and tell her friends online how supportive I'd been. It was nauseating. Watching her play the role of the devoted girlfriend while secretly plotting behind my back made me realize something cruel. She didn't just want to use me. She wanted to own me. One night, she curled up beside me on the couch, resting her head on my shoulder. "Promise me we'll never lie to each other," she whispered. Her voice cracked in a way that almost made me believe her. Almost. I looked at her and said, "Yeah, Nat, no lies." She smiled, closed her eyes, and sighed like she'd just won something. But in that moment, all I felt was pity, because she had no idea that every word, every kiss, every fake promise was being archived, time-stamped, saved, and backed up in a folder called Truth. And yet, a part of me still hoped she'd stop, that maybe, somehow, she'd look me in the eye and confess before it went too far. But manipulators don't stop when they're winning. They only stop when they destroy everything in their path. And soon, she'd turn her weapon toward me. It started on a quiet Sunday morning, one of those deceptively peaceful days when the air feels too still. Natalie came into the kitchen wearing one of my shirts, holding her phone like it had just delivered devastating news. Her eyes were glassy, her tone soft. "Can we talk?" she asked. I nodded, bracing myself. "I know what you've been doing," she said. My stomach dropped for a second. Had she found the recordings? But then she continued. "I know about her." "Her who?" I asked, genuinely confused. She slid her phone across the table. On the screen were screenshots, fake ones, of me supposedly texting my coworker, Rachel. Messages about missing her smile and finally being free. They were fabricated down to the timestamps. "Nat, these aren't real," I said quietly. "You made these." She gasped like I'd just slapped her. "How dare you accuse me of lying? I saw the messages. Everyone's seen them." "Everyone?" I repeated. That's when she smirked. Barely noticeable, but enough. I realized she'd already sent those screenshots to my friends, maybe even my boss. Her tears were calculated, every sob weaponized. "You're a liar and a cheater," she cried, grabbing her keys. "I can't believe I ever trusted you." Before I could respond, she stormed out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the frame. I stood there in stunned silence, heart pounding, staring at my own reflection in the microwave. It hit me. She wasn't just cheating. She was framing me. She'd flipped the story before I could ever tell mine. That night, messages started pouring in. Friends asking what I'd done. My boss called saying he'd heard disturbing rumors. My reputation, everything I'd built, was unraveling in real time. And the worst part? She was sitting somewhere smiling, watching it all burn. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. Natalie went all in, posting vague quotes about betrayal and toxic men online, crying to mutual friends, painting herself as the victim. It worked. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages like, "What did you do to her?" and, "Man, I thought you were better than this." Even my boss pulled me aside saying there'd been a complaint about inappropriate behavior at work. I tried to explain, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. Her fake screenshots had become everyone's truth. By Tuesday, I was suspended pending an investigation. When I came home that night, the apartment was empty. Half her stuff was gone, along with a good chunk of our joint savings. The rest of the money was transferred out just hours before I lost access to the account. That's when the knock came. 2 police officers at my door. One of them said, "Mr. Collins, we've received a harassment report against you. We just need to ask a few questions." My legs went weak. She'd filed a false report. They questioned me for nearly an hour before leaving, but by then, I was numb. I sat in that same apartment where we'd once danced barefoot in the kitchen, surrounded by memories that now felt like evidence of my stupidity. I'd lost my job, my savings, my reputation, and somehow she was still out there spinning her story like a master puppeteer. That night, I booked a cheap motel across town. The walls were thin, the air smelled like cigarettes, and I couldn't sleep. I just sat on the edge of the bed staring at the recorder in my hand. I'd been humiliated, isolated, destroyed. But somewhere under all that pain, something else started to wake up inside me. Rage. The kind that doesn't shout, it plans. The next morning, I stopped being the victim. I gathered every file, every recording, every screenshot I'd quietly collected over the past months. I organized them into folders labeled by date, phone calls, conversations, even her bragging about moving the money soon. Then I walked into a lawyer's office with shaking hands and a folder full of truth. He listened in silence as I told him everything. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "You've got something solid here. Don't confront her. Let's do this legally." That single sentence shifted everything. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had ground to stand on. Following his advice, I went quiet. I stopped defending myself, stopped replying to her friends, stopped trying to prove anything. Natalie mistook my silence for guilt. She started gloating online, posting selfies with cryptic captions like, "Truth always wins." She even showed up at my workplace one afternoon, crocodile tears and all, trying to get sympathy. I stood there, listening to her sob about how I ruined her trust. I wanted to scream, to expose her right there. But instead, I just nodded and said, "You're right, Natalie. I really did underestimate you." That night, my lawyer and I filed 2 claims, one for defamation and one for financial fraud. The moment those documents were signed, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. I didn't need to argue with her anymore. I didn't need to beg anyone to believe me. I had proof. And I was going to let the system, slow, methodical, merciless, do what rage never could. As I left the law office, the city lights blurred through the rain, and I realized something profound. Sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. 2 weeks later, the first mediation meeting was scheduled. I walked into the conference room wearing the same suit I'd worn to our anniversary dinner last year. It felt symbolic, like I was reclaiming something she'd taken. Natalie was already there, sitting across the table with that familiar mask of fragile innocence. Her lawyer beside her, mine across from me. She smiled like nothing had ever happened. "Hi," she said softly, voice trembling just enough to seem believable. I nodded, but didn't speak. My lawyer began presenting evidence. The joint account withdrawals, the fabricated screenshots traced back to her editing app, the voice recordings. Then he pressed play. Her laughter filled the room. "He's so gullible. It's actually kind of sad." Natalie froze. Her smile vanished. My lawyer didn't stop there. He played another clip, her bragging about moving the money, about making me look like the bad guy first. Her voice echoed off the walls, crystal clear, undeniable. "Context," she stammered. Those are jokes. I was venting." Her lawyer placed a hand on her arm, but she jerked away, panic flashing in her eyes. "He's manipulating this. He's twisting everything," she shouted, her voice cracking under pressure. But it was over. The calm, collected version of Natalie everyone knew had shattered. The room was silent except for the sound of her own words playing back at her. I didn't say a thing. I just watched her unravel. Watched the mask finally slip off her face. For the first time she looked small, exposed, afraid. When the recording ended, my lawyer closed the folder and said quietly, "We rest our case." Natalie didn't even look at me as she stood up and stormed out, and I just sat there, hands still, heart steady, realizing that the woman who once controlled every part of my life was finally losing control of her own. The days after that mediation were surreal. It was like watching a storm reverse itself, tearing back through the destruction it left behind. Natalie's lies started to collapse, one after another. Her friends stopped defending her once the truth came out. Screenshots of her messages leaked online, shared by someone she'd once bragged to. The same people who called me a monster were now flooding my inbox with apologies. My boss reinstated me after HR reviewed the case, and the police withdrew the false report. "We're sorry for the misunderstanding," they said, like it was a minor inconvenience instead of a public execution of my character. But I didn't care. I had my life back. Natalie, though, she lost everything. Her employer found out about the fraud investigation and she was quietly let go. Her social media turned into a ghost town overnight. Even her so-called friends stopped answering her calls once the legal notices hit. I didn't celebrate. There was no joy in watching someone drown in a sea they filled themselves. Just silence. One night I walked past the old apartment. The lights were off, curtains drawn. Through the window, I could see the faint outline of the couch we used to sit on. It looked smaller now, like even the furniture couldn't stand her weight anymore. I could have gone to the media, told the whole story, made her humiliation complete. But I didn't. I just turned around and walked away. Because true revenge isn't about noise. It's about knowing you survived what was meant to destroy you, and watching your enemy fade into the quiet they once forced you to live in. Months passed, but the silence felt different now. Not empty, peaceful. The lawsuit wrapped up quietly, away from gossip and headlines. The court ruled in my favor. Defamation, emotional distress, and reimbursement for the funds she'd stolen. It wasn't a massive payout, but it was enough to close the wound she'd opened in my life. I remember standing outside the courthouse that day, the air crisp, the city loud around me. And for the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. My lawyer clapped me on the back and said, "You handled this the right way." Maybe I did, or maybe I just didn't have anything left to lose. I moved into a small apartment across town. Bare walls, quiet mornings, no trace of her perfume or her fake apologies. At night, I'd sit by the window listening to the hum of traffic, feeling something I hadn't felt since before I met her. Peace. The money wasn't the real victory. It was the control I'd taken back. I even donated part of the settlement to a local domestic abuse foundation, because I knew too many people who never got their proof, who were buried by lies they couldn't fight. Sometimes, I'd get messages from people who'd seen the case online. They called me brave. I didn't feel brave. I just felt free. Every scar she left on me became a reminder that I didn't break. I adapted. I learned. I healed quietly, without theatrics, without revenge fantasies, because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. In the sound of a door closing softly behind you and the knowledge that you'll never have to open it again. It's been almost a year since everything ended. I don't think about her much anymore. Not out of anger, but because there's nothing left to think about. The woman I loved never really existed. She was a performance, a mask carefully designed to keep me hooked. But sometimes when I'm cleaning out old files or scrolling through old emails, I still stumble upon traces of her. A picture, a playlist, a text I forgot to delete. Last week I found something unexpected. A voice memo buried deep in my old phone backups. It was dated early in our relationship. Out of curiosity, I pressed play. Her voice came through soft and familiar. "Promise me you'll never hurt me," she said, laughing. I couldn't handle being betrayed." I sat there listening, the irony sinking in like cold water. Back then, I'd answered without hesitation. "I'd never hurt you, Natalie, ever, and I kept that promise. Even when she lied, even when she framed me, even when she tried to destroy everything I was. I never became what she accused me of. I never sank to her level. So I deleted the file. Not out of spite, but because I didn't need proof anymore. I didn't need closure from her voice. The real closure was silence. Now, every morning starts the same way. Fresh coffee, open window, sunlight on the kitchen floor. The same routine I once shared with her, only now it belongs to me again. People like her think they win by breaking you. But the truth is, they destroy themselves long before you ever strike back. She built her world on lies. I rebuilt mine on truth. And that's the difference between surviving and staying haunted.